More people are working in schools than ever before. This programme features 3 educational research projects that involve the wider workforce, many of whom work with children with special educational needs.
What sound does that make at the beginning?
G. Geese.
Senior lecturer in education, Mary Doveston, has joined forces with Marion Keenahan, an educational psychologist, on a project they call Growing Talent for Inclusion.
Well, Marion and I worked to develop a classroom approach to issues that presented themselves to class teachers faced with a large number of students with emotional, social, behavioural barriers to learning.
Growing Talent for Inclusion is the system they devised. Based on methods used by educational psychologists, it focuses on the group dynamics of the class, rather than individuals with problems.
Just to remind you about the greeting, we need to do the high five, followed by saying the person's name that's on your name card.
Well, the starting point was to use a solution-focused consultation approach, where actually you're looking at what the resources that are available to you in terms of the skills and the abilities that the children bring to the situation, rather than look at, what the problems are.
The idea is that by emphasising how the class can work well as a team, everyone feels part of it, including those with behavioural and social difficulties. Recognition of when things are working well is encouraged. They call it talent spotting.
Mr. Anderson explained to you last time that working in the away teams was to be working with people who you wouldn't normally choose to work with.
Kyle, can you stand up and can you swap seats with Olivia?
The whole point of doing the research and development was to see whether we could translate it into a process that can be used by SENCOs, by teachers in schools, without the need of having to rely on the skills of an educational psychologist. And that really was why we were interested to see, can it be developed?
So we're going to make monsters this afternoon. You need to decide...
Well, we set up the focus group, and Karen Jeffs is one of the members of this focus group, which consists of educational psychologists, SENCOs, teachers from primary and secondary schools.
I attended a SENCO conference where the project was discussed about how you could change classroom dynamics, and I had this class in mind because my frustration as a SENCO with this particular class was that the dynamics of the class was clearly getting in the way of them making the progress that they were clearly capable of making.
OK, so we need to get together first of all. Who's doing what?
The class teacher was very welcoming and receptive about the project because he identified that he had issues with the class, particularly with listening skills and the children talking over each other and not respecting each other's views. So he came on board immediately.
Can I use the sellotape after you, please, Corbett? Thank you.
After Karen and the teacher had identified the main problem, they set down in writing their aim for the class.
It's almost like a mission statement for that class in terms of how they're going to move forward. And for this particular class, it was that they would be good listeners and respect each other's views.
I need a red.
Oh, sorry.
Is that the net? Yeah.
That's the net.
That looks very good.
Following her conversation with the teacher, she then moved into interviewing every member of the class to find out from themselves their view of what it's like to be in that class.
What is the most difficult part of the project is collating of the data and the student interviews. That's probably the part that takes the longest amount of time. But the delivery of the lessons, I think, it's all about team building and cooperating, and a lot of it is good practice that you already have within a school. So in terms of that side of it, I don't think it's too difficult. Right. Can you first of all tell us the name of your monster?
It's called Rocket Dude.
Oh, Rocket Dude. How did you find working in the group?
Brilliantly.
Brilliant.
I think worked together and helped each other and be kind to each other and said thank you and pleases.
When you work as a team, it's easier than working on your own because you're sharing other people's ideas.
And it was fun working with other people because you get to know them more.
That we all said pleases and thank yous and we all helped each other.
Our participants have enjoyed using the approach But it seems important that people are very clear that this is not part of some performance management system, you know, that this is about collaboration and it's not about inspection.
Jimmy Wobble Lightning. I think every school has a class that the dynamics of the class can actually get in the way of their learning. I feel quite honoured really that I've been involved in this type of research because obviously this is the sort of thing that I think could be taken into every school. Well done, let's give them a clap.
The responses that our focus group participants have given us suggests that the teachers with whom they've worked have found it invaluable in exploring their issues and coming to a greater understanding of their class.
With Callum and Paige, back in September when I had them, you could see they couldn't really work as a sort of a partnership. But I did do that deliberately this afternoon just to see it, and it's brilliant. You know.
The thing that makes this different is that we're dealing with a whole class, not a group with a particular identifiable kind of common need. You can actually feel and see the benefits of applying psychology for the benefit of a greater number of individuals. I have seen it work, I know it works, and I'm very committed to it.
When the lake is dry, the adult brine shrimps die, but the eggs do not.
Almost 500,000 support staff are now working in schools. The roles they play are many and varied, and for newly qualified teachers, there's a lot to consider. Linda Fursland has worked in a senior role in teacher education for many years. Her research project involves interviewing support staff about what they do.
There was 2 girls in year 7.
The idea of the research is to provide materials for trainee teachers to explain to them the roles of support workers in the wider workforce. Teaching assistants, learning support assistants, learning mentors, parent support advisors, and so on.
Thomas, anyone else? And Rebecca? Okay.
Schools have changed massively, particularly in the last 5 years. There's been a 44% increase in support workers in school. And because of that, and the variation across schools and across local authorities, very few people understand those changes, actually. It's even difficult for teachers, let alone trainee teachers, to know exactly what's been going on. So I decided to produce videos of interviews with different personnel. First, I got them to do 5-day diaries because I was aiming to get as much, if you like, grassroots information about what people are actually doing when they're working in the role of a support worker. I looked at the diaries and I analysed them, and I came up with a grid of categories of the sort of work that they do. And then I built on the diaries by interviewing all the diarists. So I've got about 15 interviews with a range of support workers.
I've worked with students in reception and year 1. I think probably the biggest thing that I've learned is that positive praise works for everybody. No matter how they pretend that they don't care, they do, and it does have an effect. It just takes longer, I think.
I was focusing really on their day-to-day activities. How do they support the teacher in behaviour for learning? How do they assess formatively what students are learning? Really basic questions like that. I've used tape recordings before, audio tape recordings, but this has a directness, it has a liveliness about it, which communicates very effectively. You might use a quote, for instance, in a paper, but better still to use that person actually in life quoting through video materials.
I enable children with special educational needs to access the curriculum.
My aim is to produce a package of materials which makes the work of support workers more accessible to trainee teachers. A few short excerpts which explain their work clearly will give a better understanding of the roles and expectations of support workers.
Oh, good girl. Now say it, Walter.
Steal.
Good girl.
Researchers at the Institute of Education at the University of London are also promoting a greater understanding of the wider workforce in schools. Jacek Brandt and his team's project involves trainee teachers acting as TAs during their placements.
I didn't really think that I'd need to know that much about the TA and the role that they do and the job that they do with students. However, since taking on the role as a TA once a week, I've actually realised that it is really important for a teacher to know how to communicate effectively with the TA and how to brief them before the lessons start on what's going on in the lesson and maybe even get feedback from them.
The TA hasn't been appreciated, and so one of the aims of the research is to break that barrier and to create a genuine partnership so the student teachers can actually empathise with the role, see the importance of TAs and therefore treat TAs better.
Little gems in terms of what some of the students have been discussing. One of the things that we're very keen to promote with our student teachers is the fact that they are involved in the research themselves. I think this project has shown that students have got a real contribution to make to the development of pedagogy, and what they're doing in this project is actually showing that they can be the researchers rather than being the victims, if you like, of research, and that's been very productive for them. I think it's working really well.
Very often decisions are made without a research basis. So we at the Institute thought it'd be very valuable to actually research the impact of this project. So we wrote a research proposal and we came up with a research question. How does acting as a TA help the student to become a better teacher in their own subject? The next stage was to design research methods. Questionnaires went out to all the students on the secondary PGCE, and we had about a 20% response rate. In total, about 120 questionnaires were received. And from the questionnaires, I followed up with focus group interviews, and we ran 3 focus groups of about 7 or 8 student teachers each. What did you learn working the role as a TA?
I learned how important it is to differentiate in your lessons and to really know your pupils and their needs in order to plan your lessons successfully.
I really appreciated the different dynamics of a classroom, and that's made me sort of really think about that when I plan a lesson, so I can sort of meet all the needs of the students.
It is almost like having two teachers in the classroom. If they know what they're doing and they've got roles to perform and they know what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I've become much more aware of how you can plan for different needs within the classroom.
Overwhelmingly, the students have found this a positive experience, and they also found it very educational. For example, they didn't realise the complexity of special educational needs. They tended to group SEN pupils together. What they discovered was pupils are very, very different and have very different needs.
After working as a TA, you really appreciate the differences, the different abilities, the different issues there are, literacy issues, numeracy issues.
You are covering things like differentiation and SEN on a theoretical level and seeing how, possibly how it should be done. And then you kind of get the opportunity to experiment for yourself this year and test that in the classroom and see what works with different groups.
It's had a massive effect on me, putting myself in the role of a TA in the classroom, and I've definitely brought that back into my own classroom practice.
I think it's made them realise that teaching isn't something that's static, that their practice needs to be constantly updated. And if that's going to happen, then they need to be involved and informed by research.